Who in their right mind would buy a Ram truck? You guys read the comments all the time. They always come out of the woodwork. They say that Ram trucks are the worst. And so I figured it's time to do a video on it. So I want to read an article to you because this is actually a really good topic. And I'm not sure why this is happening, but regardless, this is really interesting. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Make sure Barbeques are on. Let's get into this. I found this article on Mopar Insiders, and the title says, Ram 1500 tops lease buyouts in 2026 report. It goes on to say, in today's automotive market, affordability remains one of the biggest challenges for buyers. With new vehicle prices hovering at historically high levels and interest rates still elevated, more drivers are turning to a familiar and often smarter option, buying out their lease instead of jumping into a new vehicle. I could just end the video right here. See, personally, I don't recommend you buy out a lease unless the market has shifted to where it's actually in the favor of the consumer. In some cases, it does make sense to buy out your lease. In the market we're in today, it doesn't really make sense, although people are probably looking at the price point of new vehicles and saying, I don't want to spend more money right now. But during the times of 2020, like let's just say, for example, if you decided to lease a truck in 2019, well, in 3 years, that lease was up. Well, at that time, the market had changed so much. Trucks, especially, were worth significantly more. So if you leased a truck in 2019, you were going to either buy that lease out and then turn around and sell it, or you were going to get a trade-in number for it because it was going to be worth more than what the residual value was at the end of that lease. So in that case, yes, it made a lot of sense to just buy out the truck. But people are buying out their Ram 1500s, and the Ram 1500s topped the chart for lease buyout. So these people had a chance to drive the truck for what, 2 to 3 years, if not maybe a little bit longer, sometimes 39 months. That's what most people do, or 42 is another term that people do for leasing. And they decided, man, this was a good truck, I'm gonna buy it out. Think about that. According to the latest data from LeaseIn's 2026 annual lease buyout report, lease buyouts are no longer just a niche decision. They've become a mainstream strategy for consumers looking to control costs while maximizing value. From trucks like the Ram 1500 to SUVs like the Jeep Wrangler, the trend shows that Americans are holding on to vehicles they already know rather than taking on financial burden of something new. Now, one of the most interesting shifts in the data is who's actually buying out their leases. The average age of a lease buyout customer has steadily dropped, now sitting at 47 years old. That might not sound dramatic at first, but just a few years ago, that number was closer to 50. Younger buyers are clearly entering the picture in a bigger way. Millennials now account for more than a third of all lease buyouts. Wow, that's crazy. While Gen Z is beginning to make a measurable impact. Combined, those two groups now represent nearly half of all buyout activity. Trucks, vans, and SUVs, the motivation differs depending on age. Older buyers tend to value convenience. They already know the vehicle, trust it, and want to avoid the hassle of shopping again. Younger buyers are playing it more strategically. They're leveraging built-up equity and avoiding today's high monthly payments associated with new vehicle financing. That second group is especially important because it signals a shift in how consumers think about vehicle ownership. It's no longer just about getting something new, it's about making a smarter financial move. Top vehicles by generation. So you guys can see here, I'm not gonna go through this, but you guys see for Gen Z 1829, Honda Civic, Honda Accord, Kia Forte. Millennials 30 to 44. I'm a millennial, I didn't even know that. And then it says here, Ram 1500, Jeep Wrangler, Jeep Grand Cherokee, Gen X, 45 to 60, Ram 1500 again, Jeep Wrangler, and then Honda Pilot. So the Ram was basically in 3 of these generations of age. Isn't that crazy? It topped out in 3. So when you look at this, Ram is popular in 3 generations. That's something to consider with this too. Now, Finishing off on this article, if you're familiar with the current US market, it won't surprise you that SUVs and trucks dominate lease buyouts. About 65% of all buyouts fall into the SUV and crossover category, while trucks make up another 13%. Sedans trail behind at just 18%. That distribution reflects what people were leasing 3 years ago when these contracts began, and it also reinforces how long demand remains for utility-focused vehicles. Leading the pack in 2025 was the Ram 1500, which climbed to the #1 spot among all lease buyouts. That's a big deal, especially considering it overtook the Honda Civic, which held the top position the previous year. Right behind it was the Jeep Wrangler, a vehicle that continues to benefit from strong resale value, loyal ownership base, unique positioning in the market. Other top performers include the Honda CR-V, Toyota Tacoma, and Grand Cherokee. From a Mopar perspective, seeing both the Ram 1500 and Jeep Wrangler near the top of the charts reinforces what we've been saying for years. These vehicles hold their value and keep customers coming back. I didn't know Rams had good resale value. If you read the comments, they're depreciating pieces of junk. And this is kind of why I did this video, because I still get comments about how people don't like Ram trucks, how they're unreliable, how they don't last long, but yet people drove them for 3 years and decided to keep them. Now, regardless if that's because they don't want a more expensive car payment, the reality is Ram trucks have pretty good leases. So they could possibly re-up, get some equity out of the current lease, because Ram dealerships want to continue to sell trucks. So they're willing to make a deal where they can to make it worth the customer's while. So the reality is here, and I'm not trying to say that Ram is better than Ford or GM, because that's not what this video is about. I don't want to make it about that. I want to make it about what people keep saying in the comment section, which is Rams aren't selling, they don't hold their value, they're unreliable. These people had these trucks for 3 years. If they were unreliable, if they were having a bunch of issues, they wouldn't keep them. And think of it like this. Ram 1500 climbed to the top of the chart for lease buyouts. That is very interesting. Now, I'll show it to you here really quick. I'm not going to go through this, but you guys will see average market value for the Ram 1500 is $37,961. And it's actually the highest average market value out of the top 10 listed here. And that's simply because pickup trucks typically carry higher MSRPs, with the exception of the Grand Cherokee and the Jeep Wrangler. Sometimes they can carry pretty high MSRPs too, but look at the average equity. $5,476. That is pretty insane. Now you guys see the Toyota Tacoma is on this list, and it carries actually a pretty good equity too at $6,601. And then topping the list is the Honda CR-V at $7,886, almost $8,000 of average equity. So yes, I'm not trying to prove that Ram is better than Ford or GM in this video. I want to make this point really quickly. This just means that people who actually go out and drive a Ram truck and then they decide to lease it and they have it for 3 years, they're saying, man, not a bad truck. It was reliable, dependable, got decent fuel economy probably for most people, and so they felt like it was a good truck to keep, so they decided to buy it out. And I will say this, that's the best benefit of leasing, because what's the best used car you can purchase? It's the one you just owned, right? So when you do buy out a lease, you are having to purchase it and retitle the vehicle. So yes, it is considered a used vehicle, and you are basically the second owner of that vehicle. So that is probably the reason why I don't normally buy out leases. I have leased in the past, and I've never bought out a lease. I've always just walked away. And sometimes, in some cases, there have been cars, like I leased a Volkswagen one time, and I did that simply because Volkswagens are just, they don't hold their value. And so at the end of that lease, I looked at what I could get for trade-in value versus what the car was actually worth, and it was not even worth keeping that car. So that's why I say leasing does carry some benefits. And I think when you are looking at these more expensive trucks, like everything is so much more expensive, this is the perfect time to lease. It's simply because of how expensive everything is. We don't know what the market's going to do in 2 or 3 years, right? So you're just kind of playing it safe, I would say, with leasing. I would like to see how Ford and GM would fare against Ram. Even Toyota Tundra, I would like to see the numbers for those trucks for like average market value and average equity. Like, it's interesting how Ram 1500 just climbed to the top of the list for lease buyouts. Very interesting. I'm not sure why that got triggered. I cut that footage because I wanted to give you a backstory really quickly, because I don't want to create narratives, obviously, but here's what you need to understand. In 2024, Ram released the 2025 Ram 1500s. Those trucks had the Hurricane engine. I'm wondering if these lease buyouts are triggered because some of those guys didn't want the Hurricane engine. That's what I'm wondering. Now, here's what I'll say. A few of my friends, you guys know Barry over at C-Tech, Rocky Road, and the car guy online, Jeremy. Those three guys have done a lot of videos around the Ram 1500s and how they love the trucks with the Hurricane engine, right? And some of the guys in the comment section too have reported that they love their Hurricane engine. I think one guy actually had like over 50,000 miles on his truck at the time. With that being said, most of these lease maturities are from 2023 and 2022. So it's very possible that these guys are buying out their truck because maybe they don't know that Ram brought back the 5.7, so they decided to buy their truck out. That's very possible. So I don't want to create a narrative as if the Ram trucks are just so great and that's why guys are buying out the truck. It's very possible that they bought them out because of the Hurricane engine. But what I'll tell you is, based off of people who've owned the truck, they do love their Hurricane engine. And I know some of you guys might think that I'm a Ram fanboy, but I like to defend Ram sometimes because most people in the comment section hate on the brand, and mostly it's Ram. Like, whenever I see hate in the comment section, it's typically Ram trucks. Most of those guys have never owned the truck. I've had 3 Ram trucks. Not one of those trucks had any issues. And I drove those trucks hard. One of those trucks, I put like 30,000 miles on it in like a year. So despite all of the hate and the negativity in the comment sections, I'm telling you guys, if you are loyal to a brand, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not out there at least test driving a truck before you make a decision, I think you're doing yourself an injustice. And I think the Hurricane engine, that's the best powertrain to lease right now, simply because it is new and you can actually get a really good deal on a Ram truck right now. So hope this video was helpful. As I said, I didn't want to create a narrative. I think that it's possible that these lease buyouts are triggered from, people just not wanting the new powertrain, so they decided to keep their truck because they had, good experience with the Ram brand. So there you have it. See you guys in the next one.